Hi, everybody. Sure glad to be here this evening. I'm here again with Living Well, and we're just glad that you're here. Either you're watching it together with us now live, and if you are, you can certainly type in questions and I'll see them and we can do that and we'll answer them as we can. Tonight, our topic is marriage and mental health issues. And I have with me a good friend, but I'm going to confess she's a really good friend, but I can't pronounce her last name worth beans. So I just say, ladies and gentlemen, with me now is Aaron R. Aaron, hi.
Hi, it's so good to be here. And no
Yeah.
problem. My last name is a mouthful.
Oh, yeah. And so Aaron, tell me how to say your last name, or tell everybody who you are with your last name.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Ramachandran, and I am the co founder of Mental Health Strong with my husband. And we believe that there's a need to bring a community together to bring hope, resources, and support to marriages and couples with mental health and addiction challenges. So we're excited to continue our friendship and partnership with Fresh Hope as we work
Absolutely.
together on this.
I'm putting it back up there. It's mentalhealthstrong.com, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, um, everybody, I mean, sometimes we don't think about the fact that, you know, mental health affects um, all of us. Or, when, let me say that again. That wasn't good. I'm trying to do two things at one time, and that's not working so well. But when there's a mental health challenge in a marriage, when one spouse or the other has a diagnosable mental illness, it really can put a strain on the marriage.
Yeah.
And, when I was diagnosed, we had been married maybe, by that time, we had been married 15 years or something like that. And, that was not, we had a lot of time under our belts, but not enough to make it easy breezy. I don't think it's ever easy breezy when people, have a mental health challenge in a marriage. It's kind of like when there's alcoholism, when there's drug addictions, when there's, other issues, all kinds of stuff. So, um, I think it's really important. And Aaron, you've really helped Donna and myself realize that it's something that we don't talk about very often. But I know in our own marriage, when I crashed and burned, Donna had to become everything to everyone in the family, including me, a caregiver. I mean, it was
Mhm.
almost as though she was like a parent to me, you know.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was not functioning very much at all. And then finally, when I got better, then we had to flip back to doing things together, like parenting together and planning things together. And that was hard. It wasn't easy. It
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
was pretty difficult at times. So, well, anyway, you have really created what I think it's your working genius because man, I'm telling you what, these two things that I'm asking you to share with everybody tonight about marriage and things like that. And just talk to us. Just tell us about what you know.
Absolutely. And also, Brad and Donna, I want to say that your marriage is an inspiration as a couple that's been married for over 40 years. And there's many of us that are coming behind you to help do the long journey. You know, you talked about 15 years and then the diagnosis. My husband and I have been married about 15 years, and he was diagnosed right at the beginning of it. So we didn't have those 15 years of more stable. And so the idea is that when you make that commitment, Donna and I were talking about this, when you make that commitment in sickness and in health, sometimes it's in sickness. And the way that we're able to think it through is think about if someone was diagnosed with cancer or diabetes, you know, it's the same thing
Absolutely.
with depression and bipolar and OCD and etc. But because we can't physically see the illness, it makes it seem like it's different. And so I really encourage people to Google the disorder that their loved one or spouse has, and to then look at the images of the brain scan so they can really see that there's actually chemical changes in
Right.
the brain. So it helps to normalize it a little bit
Well, and you
when you're with that.
realize that it's physical. I mean,
It's a physical
we
thing.
do not think of mental illnesses or mental health issues, but if we had a brain tumor, we would understand that was
We
physical,
would.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when your partner and loved one or spouse has a mental health condition, it's not going to be easy, just like it wouldn't be easy if I became sick, right? If I had cancer, it would be hard on Keith. But to look at it as we're in this together and to think about this journey together. And that's where that first diagram comes up when it talks about the different stages
I'll put
of,
that up here for everybody
yeah,
to
that would be
see.
great. So crisis, growing, surviving, and thriving. And so, if we were to take those different stages from a standpoint of the first one, crisis, right? That's the one where you're just like ready to give up. You're holding on. You don't even know if you can do this. Someone had said something to me. I don't remember who it was, but just said, like, you should make no decisions when you're in crisis. And I really like that input, similar to like when someone dies, you wouldn't make big decisions. And so I think in the crisis, the main stage is just to get through it, whether your spouse is in an inpatient hospital or whether they're in jail, homeless, and again, to not look at it as something's wrong, or that you're in separation and divorce, but the idea is that, you know, your loved one's not functioning, and to try to match the level of support to the level of functioning. So if you're in crisis, you need a lot of support, both from a professional and personal care team. So you want to make sure that you put that in there. The next stage we've got there is the existing or surviving stage, we call it, which is basically when people are walking on eggshells. You are not really working as a team. You're kind of working individually. And the idea is you're not really recognizing how it's being impacted in the relationship and how you need to work together with that. And so in this stage, it's really about each person individually getting the care that they need to make changes. Sometimes in this stage, like uh, couples I've talked to, they're like, well, my loved one doesn't want to get diagnosed or doesn't recognize there's a condition. And so if that's the case, I really encourage, well, get your own support so that you can make the decisions that you need to or set up the boundaries you need to. But one person changing can impact the whole relationship. And so really focus on what you can control, whether you're the person with the diagnosis or without the diagnosis. So the idea is everybody is empowered to make choices and to put the changes that they need to be their best self. And Brad and I have talked about this before many times, but the idea is that it's not one person that has the problem. Both people have the
Right,
problem.
right.
Both
Yeah.
people have emotional issues. Even though I might not have a diagnosis, I still have anger issues. I still have codependency issues. I still have comfort eating issues. So the idea is we all have issues
Oh,
and
yeah.
they impact our loved ones, and we can feed off of each other. And we find if he gets triggered, I get triggered, and we trigger each other. And so the idea is you got to break that
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
surviving stage.
Yeah. And like I think Donna and I have said to you that one of the things that we've learned is that we focus on the illness, the
Correct.
disorder that we're working at against bipolar together.
Correct.
She's not working against me, but we're working together on that.
I
But
love
go
it. I
ahead.
love it.
Go ahead. I don't
Yep.
want to.
And then the growing stage, that's where you're really trying to grow and get help. And again, the idea is that each person can do that change individually. And obviously, the healthiest is when both people are trying to do that change. The one thing to note with the expectation of the growing stage is growth is not like a straight line going up a mountain.
Right.
It's like this. So you have 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. And so the idea is to look at that longevity. And actually, I was talking to Donna about that this week of just in our own marriage. Keith has gone from 12 hours a day of cleaning. He's has an obsessive compulsive disorder, and now is down to like 1 to 2 hours. And he's had times where he wasn't able to work, and he is working. So the idea is that level of functioning, kind of looking at the long term and the growth that we've made as a couple. And even for me, there were seasons where I was yelling every day, or I was trying to control him every day, right? And
Sure.
that would trigger him. And so to look at the progress I've made in my own recovery of letting him make his choices, I make my choices, learning boundaries, those sort of things. And then the thriving stage is really where you and both people are living their best life, the couple. And we really believe that each couple is unique in how they got married, and they're a unique couple together, and they have different gifts and talents and strengths and purpose. And so the idea is thinking about how you as a couple can give back together. And again, every marriage has trials. And so in your and I's marriage, it's, a condition that we're fighting together. And so the idea is, how do we use that for good? And, the work, Brad, you and Donna have been leading of helping mental health in the church and helping those with lived experience have hope and freedom and recovery, and to know that you're not defined by your condition and you can have really amazing lives. And then I think you have the work of your marriage and your family also has a legacy that you are a story of hope. And so, for Keith and I, we really feel passionate about helping couples. And so, that's a way that we can give back with our pain and purpose. And, Rick Warren talks about that, sometimes your greatest pain is your greatest purpose. And for us, this is our greatest pain, but we've been able to work through it, get professional help, get personal help, and work as a couple. And the idea is, in any of these stages, you can kind of bounce around. We are not going to be in the thriving stage. We have, stuff that happens, illness of a parent or a job loss or whatever, right? And we go right back into crisis, and then we got to work our way out. But the idea is that you do better in moving through them. You don't stay in a stage as long.
Right. You don't stay
as you
stuck.
bounce through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get stuck. I like that word.
I also believe that there's times where you're in a certain area of your life, and in another area of your life you're thriving, and maybe you're, like for me with my exercising and taking care of myself physically, I don't even know that I'm coping. You know what I'm saying? But as far as mental health or emotional health, I'm thriving usually. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly.
Good. So the second slide, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Beware the danger zone.
Yes. Yeah.
So we created this because as we got healthier, and again, we haven't arrived. We still, just like any couple struggle, we just struggle less. But the idea is, when we looked at different things about just unacceptable behaviors, or if I dare to say the word abuse or different things, I don't think that when you first get married or do premarital counseling or whatever, you don't really learn about these things of what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah.
You might hear stories in the news, you might different things. You're like, well, we don't do that. And so the thing that Keith and I were talking about is, how do we really bring that clarity about what is really unacceptable behaviors? And you can't just use, well, it's within the context of the marriage or whatever. And so we wanted to really call those out. And we're calling it be aware of the danger zone. So those unacceptable behaviors of like potential violence or lack of safety, extreme anger or rage, name calling or belittling, power, control, manipulation, where there's, most days where you're not functioning, either in one person or both, you're in the crisis zone. And again, that's where you really need to have intense support, both professionally and personally, with around you, and you as a couple, because those things are unacceptable and we
Well,
need to call it for what it is.
absolutely. And on top of it, even if there's not a mental health issue in a
Yes.
marriage, maybe there's not a diagnosis, but there are emotional issues or marriage difficulties because of coming from very different families, or somebody came from a very shame-based family.
Right.
That's not a mental health diagnosis, but it causes emotional issues and stuff. And I would think this triangle would be good for anybody in their marriage.
Anybody. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
then the surviving stage, if we go to that, these are difficult behaviors that, if you don't recognize them, they will escalate to a crisis. And you know how you can have a fight about one thing and it escalates to many things. And some of those
Yeah.
behaviors can be stonewalling or ignoring, anger or flooding, minimizing the other, blaming or denial, right? Where you're just not listening and it's just escalating. So you have to really be careful of that. And that a lot of times happens in that surviving stage. So think about, is that happening most of your days, where you're not functioning well as a couple? Again, you need to be careful. Like, you are crossing in between surviving and crisis, and that's exhausting. And that will have long-term effects for anybody. It will burn people out, whether you have a condition or not. And so really need to recognize where the health of the relationship
Yeah.
is and to put some interventions in, because you as a couple or you as an individual are not functioning if you're living in these two stages.
Well, and I honestly believe that when you're teetering between those two stages and you're constantly basically in crisis and you're in danger, you've got that fight and flight stuff going on. And what you're doing is any kind of reservoir that you have of serotonin or any of the good stuff in your brain, the dam or the reservoir gets whittled down to nothing. So it doesn't take much and you have nothing left.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so again, we've been in all these stages. We've done basically probably all the behaviors on here. And the idea was like, why haven't we learned about this? Why don't we know about this? Why is it just if you're taking professional, psychology classes, do you learn about this stuff? Like, how do we get this to the everyday person
Yeah.
that needs this information, right?
Yeah.
And in our premarital and marriage stuff over the years, like, no one's ever talked about this stuff. And so again, it could just be that we just didn't find it, but we thought this is something that we could help um, other couples with it. So, if we move to the growing phase, these are things that de-escalate. So again, no relationship's perfect. You've got a condition in the relationship that's more challenging, again, especially in the beginning years where you're learning how to work with it. But talking about grace and forgiveness, boundaries, speaking limits and needs, lower the expectations. So this is not saying you ignore it, you only talk positive about it, right? We're not talking
Right.
about toxic positivity. We're talking about speaking limits, needs,
Yeah.
boundaries. These are like communication skills, like learning healthy communication skills in your relationship. And the more days you do this, the more you're going to start functioning as an individual and you as a couple.
Yeah. With interdependence as opposed to not codependent and not totally independent of each other. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the last one is the thriving. And, these are healthy behaviors. And, I think these take a lifelong journey of us up growing, right, to learn these. So
Oh, yeah. And
and trigger can kind of set us back into those childlike behaviors, or like, where did that come from?
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and the idea is you care for yourself and the other person with your words and actions. Again, you have healthy choices and boundaries. You speak truth and love and appreciation, and you provide a flexibility and the ability to change. Think about it like I'm not responsible for Keith's health. He's not responsible for mine. I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for my choices and my words and my actions, and he's responsible for his. We can help each other out, but it's got to be a healthy interdependence, not codependency. And
Right.
so we have that where there's things we do together and we have a beauty with that, and there's things we do separate, and that's
Hmm.
good. And we support one another in that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It,
these are,
it,
again, beware the danger zone, look at the level of,
oh,
and
yeah,
look at
and I
who,
just think
how you're
this is,
interacting.
you put this together and it's brilliant. It really is brilliant because it can help people to kind of evaluate or assess where they're at.
Right,
And,
right.
you know, and to say, okay, this is in that area. Well, maybe we need to start thinking differently or doing different things. What I so appreciate with it is being the one with the diagnosis. For early on after I had been diagnosed, I went through a period where I felt such shame about it. And I felt like, well, I'm the broken one in the relationship, and I'm the, then I went through a period of thinking, no, I'm not the only broken one in this relationship. There's issues, and no, she's not perfect. And, um, generally speaking, I don't have problems with that anymore today because most people recognize that my wife is like way beyond what I deserve and things like that. But it, it, for a long time, it would make me say, well, she's not completely perfect. I just want you to know, But what I really appreciate is that you're really saying this is about the marriage. This is about the two of you working together and doing well in spite of having this kind of elephant in the room sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing to call out is that we're talking a long journey and marathon when, and again, I think the work that Fresh Hope does and Mental Health Strong and others, like, we're not talking about the diagnosis that gets treated and goes away. We're
Right.
talking about the conditions that are lifelong, kind
Hmm.
of in that chronic conditions, right?
Yep.
That go in the disability. So it's like the idea is it's a long journey, and just like you guys would probably say you had, I'll let you speak for yourself
Oh,
how
we've
many
had
years for us, but we had
seasons.
at
Yeah.
least 12 very, very, very hard years. And we've been married 15, right? So we're still coming out.
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
looking at the full journey together. Like,
Right.
you'll hear Keith and I say we're each other's snuggle bugs. Like, we're in this together, and we
Yeah.
love each other. And so the idea is that you're looking at the long journey, but when you're in a certain phase, recognize it and get that extra help. We
Yep.
cannot do this alone.
Yep.
And I think stigma and shame keep us where we're like, ooh, I can't tell anybody. And it's like, no, no, no. If I'm in crisis, like, pull in the team and working proactively to be planning for when the crises happen, because they're going to happen. That's a
Yeah.
part of these conditions.
Yeah.
We go up and down.
Yeah. Now, hopefully, we at Fresh Hope help people to minimize that going up and down and
Yep.
relapsing and things like that, because sometimes it is possible to avoid those things if you really stay on top of your own recovery. Other times, it can be difficult. One of the things I tell people as a pastor through the years of doing hundreds and it feels like thousands and thousands of marriages. One summer, 28 weddings alone from May to August. Yeah, yeah, alone. I became an expert on white wedding cake. Um, but you know, uh, one of the things I've told people through the years is you can't enter into marriage thinking if this gets too difficult, I can always get out of it. Because if you're thinking if I can't do this, I'm going to get a divorce. You're gonna look for reasons to do that constantly. And so Donna and I kind of entered into our marriage saying divorce is just not an option. It's not an option. Murder, yes. Jokingly, we say that. But, it's just one of those things where now we haven't always felt like we loved each other. There were times where we could barely stand each other, but in the long haul, love is not a feeling. It really is one word, and that is commitment. It's sheer and adulterated. It's a decision. And yeah, so
Absolutely.
well, and I want to encourage people if you're interested, we do have some mental health strong fresh hope groups that will be starting here online
Yeah.
sooner or later. And we're
Yeah.
kind of in the process yet, but soon you'll see some things on where if somebody has a mental health issue, um, they can come to this group together as husband and wife, or as spouses, I should say.
Yep.
In today's world, it's not always, but that you can, with your loved one, or it could be, you don't have to be married, but you could be in a committed relationship. And where one of you has a diagnosis and you're working at it and you want to get better at it. And but also then maybe there's some of you that have a spouse that doesn't participate and you want to participate in a group. Get a hold of Erin. She has a group even now that you can attend as the spouse of someone who has a mental health diagnosis, right?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and how do they do that? They email you or
Oh, they can just go to the website, mentalhealthstrong.com, and then go to the resources and the peer support groups. And
Yep.
so we have it for the spouse that's walking alongside someone with the
Yes.
diagnosis.
Yes.
And then if someone has the diagnosis, we want them to come to your groups.
Yes.
to
Yeah.
get, so it's just
Yeah.
this and beautiful synergy.
Well, and that's the other thing I was going to say. One of the things that's been so wonderful is I've met numerous other leaders through the years of doing this, and everybody says, well, let's collaborate or let's work together. And then many times people don't, or it's all about their brand and not, you know what I'm saying? And I got to say, Erin and Fresh Hope, Mental Health Strong and Fresh Hope have been really working together for about a year now. And we really are doing some collaborating where we're not creating what each other's doing. And
there's no reason to.
No, there's no reason to do it. And
it's all under the kingdom of God, It's like I can't do anything, nor do I want to. Like that's the beauty of God bringing people together. So it's great.
Yeah. So we want everyone out there that might listen to this later to just know that it's good to work on your marriage. That's it. In fact, each of your mental health will improve when you work on it. Your emotional health will get better. Your mental health will get better. And probably your physical health, because I think when we are feeling better emotionally, many times we take better care of ourselves and things like that. So, well, Erin, again, the website is mentalhealthstrong.com, and there is a book that you've written, and tell us about that and where people can get a hold of it.
Oh, okay. So the first book, Mental Health Strong, you can get on Amazon, and that's a Christian's guide for walking alongside a spouse with a mental health condition. So that has the 8 steps that have worked for me, and again, they parallel with a lot of stuff that Fresh Hope talks about too, of just what works.
Yeah.
And then Keith and I have written the manuscript for the second book, which will be called Mental Health Strong Marriage. And that will include many of these diagrams that we're talking about through the encouragement of Brad and 2 other people at 3 different times. They said, you got to get this out. So
absolutely,
it's coming. We're working on it. And so it should be out, sometime this year or next year, but the manuscript's at least written. So we're just going through that process.
Yeah. And for those of you who are watching this next week, I believe that I'll be talking about parenting
That's
together
great.
when there's a mental health issue. How do you parent? How do you talk to your children? How do you, you know, all those kinds of good things. And so, thank you so much for being here this evening, Aaron, and I'm sure I'll have you back and you and
Yeah.
together. And but thank you so much. We really appreciate you and what you're doing, and I believe in it. I believe in it, and I'm so glad to have met you along the way. So, God
I feel
bless
the
you.
same.
All
God
right.
bless you as well.
Well, good deal. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here this evening. And I'm so glad Aaron was part of this. And we want to ask you to, if you're married, maybe watch this together, rewatch it, or spend time asking each other, okay, what phase do you think we're in? How do you think we're really doing on the marriage? Not how are you doing, Brad, with your bipolar disorder? And then that determines how we're going to do in the marriage. Because when you work on it, marriage takes work. Successful marriages take work and commitment. More than anything, commitment to not run away when things get hard. And things get hard in life. You don't have to have a mental health challenge in the marriage for you to know that. There's all kinds of issues that can crop up. So, anyway, next week we'll talk about parenting when you have a mental health issue and all of those kinds of good things. So, God bless you. We'll see you next week, living well at 7 p.m. Central Time. Bye, everybody. Take care.